Here in the very heart of equatorial Africa lies a land of incredible natural wealth. This is Gabon. It sits astride the equator, a jewel on the continent's western coast, bordered by the vast Atlantic Ocean. Much of the country is covered by a dense emerald-green rainforest. This forest is a sanctuary for life. It is home to an astonishing array of plants and animals, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth. The air is thick with the sounds of the jungle, a constant chorus of insects, birds, and monkeys calling from the canopy above. It is a world teeming with biodiversity, a testament to the power of nature left largely untouched. These ancient forests are some of the most pristine on the planet. Great trees, hundreds of years old, reach for the sunlight, their massive trunks forming a cathedral-like canopy. Below, the forest floor is a mosaic of light and shadow, where elusive creatures make their homes. Forest elephants, a smaller, shyer cousin of the savanna elephant, move silently through the undergrowth. Gorillas and chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, thrive in these protected realms. The government of Gabon has made a remarkable commitment to conservation, setting aside huge areas of its land as national parks, ensuring this natural heritage survives for future generations. Beyond the deep rainforests, Gabon's landscape transforms. Savannas stretch out under the wide African sky, providing a different kind of habitat for a different community of animals. Mighty rivers like the Great Ogu carve their way through the land, flowing from the interior highlands down to the sea. These rivers are the lifeblood of the nation, providing water, food, and transport routes for both wildlife and people. They have shaped the land over millennia, creating vast wetlands and deltas that are crucial for migratory birds and countless aquatic species. It is a dynamic and varied landscape, rich in resources and natural beauty. Along the coast, the rainforest meets the ocean in a spectacular display. Mangrove swamps line the estuaries, their tangled roots providing a nursery for young fish and protecting the coastline from erosion. Pristine white sand beaches stretch for miles, visited not by tourists but by nesting sea turtles that have been making this journey for millions of years. Humpback whales migrate to these warm, sheltered waters to give birth and raise their calves. This meeting of land and sea is a place of immense power and vitality, and it is here, where the river meets the ocean, that the story of Gabon's name truly begins. The year is 1472. The world is on the cusp of great change. European explorers, driven by a quest for new trade routes to the east, are venturing further down the African coast than ever before. Among them are the Portuguese, skilled and daring navigators armed with new technologies like the caravel, a ship designed for long ocean voyages. These sailors were charting unknown waters, mapping coastlines, and making contact with peoples and cultures entirely new to them. Their journey was one of discovery, but also one that would forever alter the course of history for the lands they encountered. These Portuguese explorers, sailing under the command of figures like Rui de Sequeira, were meticulously charting the African coastline. They sailed south past the powerful currents of the Komo River, pushing into the vast expanse of the Gulf of Guinea. Every bay, every river mouth, and every cape was a new feature to be documented and named. These names were often practical, describing a geographical feature, or they were religious, honoring a saint on whose feast day the discovery was made. This methodical process of naming and mapping was an essential part of claiming knowledge and, eventually, influence over these new territories. As they navigated the equatorial coast, the sailors faced immense challenges. The humid tropical climate was unfamiliar and unforgiving. Diseases were a constant threat, and the unpredictable ocean currents and weather systems tested their seamanship to the very limit. Yet they pressed on, drawn by the promise of wealth, gold, spices, and ivory, and the strategic advantage of finding a sea route to India. Their logs and charts were filled with detailed observations, not just of the coastline, but of the people, the wildlife, and the resources they found, painting the first European picture of this part of the world. It was in this era of intense exploration and discovery that the Portuguese ships first approached the coast of what we now call Gabon. They were not looking for a new country to create, they were simply navigating a complex coastline and documenting its features. They were unaware of the vast, biodiverse rainforest that lay just beyond the shore. Their focus was on the immediate geography, the safe harbors, and the river estuaries that might offer passage into the interior, or opportunities for trade. It was one such geographical feature that would catch their eye and give this land its enduring name. As the Portuguese ships sailed along the coast, they came upon a remarkable sight. Here, the land opened up to reveal a wide, sheltered body of water. It was not a simple river mouth, but a vast estuary, a place where several rivers, including the large Komo River and the smaller Imbe River, merge and mix with the saltwater of the Atlantic Ocean. This expansive inlet, stretching nearly 40 miles inland, created a magnificent natural harbor, protected from the harsh waves of the open sea. For sailors who had spent months navigating the challenging African coast, such a safe anchorage was an invaluable discovery. The shape of this estuary was what truly captured the imagination of the Portuguese navigators. The way the land curved around the water combined with the wide open mouth of the inlet reminded them of a specific item of clothing. To their eyes, the estuary looked like a type of coat with a hood that was popular in Portugal at the time. This coat, known as a Gabão in Portuguese, was a long hooded cloak worn by sailors and common folk to protect themselves from the wind and rain. The shape of the coastline seemed to mimic the sleeves and hood of this familiar garment. This visual association was a common practice for explorers of the era. Naming a place after a familiar object was a simple and effective way to remember and describe it. The world was full of new and strange sights, and drawing parallels to the familiar world back home made the unknown seem more manageable. The Komo River estuary, with its unique and suggestive shape, was no exception. It was a landmark that stood out, a feature that was easy to identify on a map and describe to fellow sailors. The name was born not from the people or the culture but from the pure geography of the place. Today, the estuary remains the heart of the nation. The capital city, Libreville, which means Freetown in French, was founded on its northern shore. The estuary is a hub of activity, a center for commerce, fishing, and transport. The city's modern skyline now overlooks the same body of water that the Portuguese sailors first saw over 5 centuries ago. The shape of the coastline has not changed, and if one looks at a map today, it is still possible to see the form of the hooded cloak that so inspired those early European explorers, a permanent geographical feature that gave a country its name. The name given by those first sailors was Gabão. This Portuguese word, directly referencing the hooded cloak, was initially used to identify only the estuary itself. On early maps drawn by Portuguese and other European cartographers, the name Gabão points specifically to this large inlet on the coast. It was a geographical marker, a name for a place, not for a people or a kingdom. The vast interior, with its complex societies and diverse ethnic groups like the Fang, Mayani and Punu, remained largely unknown to the Europeans for centuries. Their world was the coast, and their name was for the coast. As European involvement in the region grew, the name began to expand its meaning. The area around the estuary became a key point of contact and trade between Europeans and local African communities. Ships from Portugal, the Netherlands, Britain and France all frequented the Gabão estuary to trade for goods. Over time, the name, which once referred only to the body of water, started to be used more broadly to describe the coastal region surrounding it. It became a convenient shorthand for this specific trading zone on the African coast, a recognizable destination for merchants and sailors. The transformation of the name from the Portuguese Gabão to the French Gabon happened gradually, reflecting the changing powers in the region. As French influence began to dominate in the 19th century, the name was adapted into the French language. The tilde over the A was dropped, and the pronunciation shifted to suit French phonetics. This linguistic shift was a clear sign of a political one. The name was being absorbed into a new colonial sphere of influence, losing its purely Portuguese origin, and becoming associated with a new European power that had its own ambitions for the territory. This evolution from a geographical feature to a regional name and finally to a national identity is a fascinating journey. It shows how names on a map are not static, they change and grow with history. The name Gabon is not rooted in an indigenous language or an ancient kingdom, but in a chance observation by a 15th century sailor. It is a name born from the sea, from the shape of the water itself, and it has clung to the land through centuries of trade, conflict and colonization, eventually becoming the official title of an independent African nation. The superb natural harbor of the Gabão estuary quickly made it an important center for trade. In the early centuries after its discovery by the Portuguese, the trade was focused on the natural resources of the forest. Europeans sought valuable goods that were in high demand back home. Ivory, from the tusks of the forest elephants, was one of the most prized commodities. Local communities, who had long established trading networks within the interior, brought ivory, precious woods like ebony and mahogany, and beeswax down the rivers to the coast to trade with the European ships waiting in the estuary. This early commerce was a complex interaction between different cultures. European traders exchanged their goods, textiles, metal tools, firearms, and alcohol for the African resources. This exchange brought new technologies and items into Gabon's interior, changing local economies and power structures. The estuary became a bustling multicultural marketplace, where the languages of the Maine people, who dominated the coastal trade, mingled with Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French. It was a place of opportunity, but also one of growing dependency on European markets and goods, setting the stage for deeper foreign involvement. Tragically, the trade soon took a much darker turn. As the demand for labor in the European colonies in the Americas grew, the estuary became a significant site in the transatlantic slave trade. Although less infamous than other slave trading centers on the African coast, countless people were captured in the interior, brought to the estuary, and forced onto ships for the horrific journey across the Atlantic. This brutal trade inflicted deep and lasting scars on the societies of Gabon, disrupting communities, fueling conflict, and causing immense human suffering. The calm waters of the estuary witnessed this terrible chapter of human history. The legacy of this trade history is still visible today. It shaped the development of the coastal areas and established the patterns of interaction with the outside world. The city of Libreville itself was founded in 1849 as a settlement for freed slaves, a direct consequence of the efforts to abolish the slave trade. The name Libreville, meaning Freetown, stands in stark contrast to the history of slavery that unfolded on the very same shores. The estuary, therefore, is not just a geographical feature. It is a landscape layered with complex histories of commerce, exploitation, and eventual liberation. By the middle of the 19th century, the balance of power on the Gabonese coast had shifted decisively in favor of France. The French Navy was actively working to suppress the slave trade in the region, which gave them a pretext to establish a permanent presence. In 1839, the French naval officer Louis-Édouard Boué-Willaume signed a treaty with a local Mienne leader known as King Denis. This treaty granted France control over the southern bank of the estuary. A few years later, in 1843, the French established a military and trading post, Fort d'Aumale, solidifying their foothold in the area. The French slowly expanded their control from this coastal base. They signed more treaties with other local chiefs, gradually extending their protectorate over the surrounding lands. The founding of Libreville in 1849 on the northern bank of the estuary created a significant administrative center. For the French, Gabon was strategically important as a naval base and a gateway into the unexplored territories of Central Africa. Explorers like Pierre Savorgnan de Bratza used Gabon as a starting point for their expeditions into the Congo Basin, further cementing French influence over a vast swath of the continent. In 1886, the French formally established the colony of Gabon, officially incorporating the territory into their growing empire. The name Gabon, the French version of the Portuguese Gabão, was now the official administrative name for the entire colony. A territory whose borders were being drawn by colonial administrators in Paris, often with little regard for the existing ethnic or cultural boundaries on the ground. The name that began as a description of an estuary now defined a large and diverse colonial possession, stretching deep into the African interior. The tricolor flag of France flew over the land named for a sailor's coat. Under French rule, colonial administration was imposed. The economy was geared towards exporting raw materials like timber and minerals to France, and French became the official language of government and education. While the French built some infrastructure such as roads, ports, and hospitals, the colonial system was primarily designed to benefit the colonizing power. The people of Gabon were now subjects of a distant European empire, their land and their future governed from afar. The name Gabon became inextricably linked with this period of foreign domination. On August 17, 1960, the nation of Gabon achieved its independence from France. It was a moment of profound change and celebration, as a new African nation took its place on the world stage. As with many newly independent African countries, there was a decision to be made about the country's name. Some nations chose to shed their colonial names and adopt new ones rooted in their pre-colonial history, such as Ghana, formerly the Gold Coast, or Zimbabwe, which was once Rhodesia. This was a powerful way to reclaim a national identity and break from the colonial past. However, the leaders of the newly independent Gabon chose to keep the name. There were several reasons for this. Unlike in some other colonies, there was no single dominant pre-colonial kingdom or empire whose name could easily represent the entire diverse nation. The name Gabon, while colonial in its application, had been used for the territory for over a century, and had become the recognized identity of the modern state. Retaining it provided a sense of continuity and avoided the potential for internal divisions that might arise from choosing a name associated with one specific ethnic group over others. Thus, the name Gabon endures, a fascinating intersection of geography and history. It is a name that speaks directly to the land itself, to the distinctive shape of the Komo River estuary as seen by Portuguese sailors centuries ago. It is a permanent reminder of the physical landscape that defines the nation's coast. At the same time, the name is a direct legacy of the age of exploration and the subsequent era of European colonialism. It tells a story of first contact, of changing global powers, and of the process by which European languages and perspectives were imprinted onto the map of Africa. Today, the name Gabon represents a proud, independent nation, known for its incredible biodiversity and its commitment to protecting its natural heritage. It is a name that carries the weight of a complex past, but also looks forward to a self-determined future. It reminds us that the identity of a place is layered, built up over time by different peoples and different histories. The story of why Gabon is called Gabon is ultimately a story written in water, shaped by the contours of the land, and carried through the currents of history to the present day.